This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of this show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Investor Connect is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors and startups for fundraising. Please consider donating $100 to the program to help others in their investor and entrepreneur journey. You can find the donate button on the investorconnect.org website. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Devin Miller, founder of Miller IP Law and host of the Inventive Journey Podcast. Miller IP Law provides patent, trademark, copyright, and other business-related services to startups and their small businesses. The Inventive Journey Podcast focuses on the journey rather than a pitch for the services and products a startup or small business may offer. Devin, thank you for having me on your show, and thank you for joining us today.
Hey, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. Always, you made for a great guest, and excited to be here as well.
Great. So where are you calling from today?
So I am out of Salt Lake City or Utah, and I'm just north of Salt Lake City. So just in here in the winter and wish we had more snow, but enjoying it nonetheless.
Great. Well, let's talk about the IP side of the world today. What do you see as the role of IP in the startup world as we live?
Yeah. So I would say, first of all, I'd back up and maybe just do as a quick level setter, answer what is IP or intellectual property. And people may or may not be as familiar with it, but intellectual property or IP is basically an umbrella term. So it includes basically three things: patents, trademarks, copyrights. So patents are for inventions, something that does something, has a functionality, software, hardware, electronics, anything in between. Trademarks are going to be for branding, basically a name of a company, name of a product, logo, catchphrase, something of that nature. And copyrights are going to be for something that's more on the creative line. So a sculpture, a painting, a book, a podcast, a video, something along those lines. And so when you're looking at IP, it's really where it's geared towards, and why it covers startups, but all sizes of business, is it's really geared towards protecting what is your intellectual property, just like it sounds. So if you're to think of real estate property, when you own something, real property, you can own a house, you can own land, you can own a car, and you have something tangible. You have a title that says, I own this. Well, it gets a bit more difficult when it's something that's less tangible. It's in your head, it's blood, sweat, and tears, R&D, research and development. Then you're saying, well, how do I capture the value there? How do I actually monetize that, make it an asset of the business, and make it protectable? And that's where intellectual property or IP comes in, to where you're able to protect the R&D that you've done for creating a new product, or protect your brand, or protect the book you've created. And so depending on what your business is, it really allows you to protect that intellectual aspect of your business that may not be as tangible, but still very valuable.
Great. How do you see it working with startups in today's world?
Yeah, so there's a few different reasons why you would go for it specifically to startup. So one is it can be purely a defensive thing. In other words, if you're looking, saying, hey, we're going to put in hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, creating a brand or creating a business, or even saying we're going to put in $10, but we're going to put in a whole bunch of blood, sweat, and tears and time and effort to create a product or get a business up and going, it's a defensive posture. It allows you to block others from being able to copy your idea. The hardest thing with inventions is once you put it out in the public, it's kind of like the magic trick. Everybody can figure out how it's done and they can create their own. And so when you do the magic trick, once you know how it's done, you can do your own. So they allow you to protect it. So as you're putting it out in the public, as people are seeing it and seeing what you're doing, and if you're gaining any sort of traction or they like the idea, then you're able to box them out, or you're able to do it as a defensive posture. The other thing is, a lot of times with startups as well, is if you're looking for, whether it's angel investors, venture capital, doing any sort of series raise, a lot of the time, and it is different for different investors, but a lot of time they're going to ask you, what's proprietary about your business? What is different about it? And then the next question is how did you protect it? Two reasons why they're doing it. They're trying to protect their downside. They're trying to say, if we're going to invest money in here, we're trying to make sure that we have something that is a risk mitigating, which can be in the form of an asset. One is that we can protect it against other people, and two, it can be an asset of the business. In other words, the business doesn't go well, maybe it's not mismanaged as well, maybe it's not or they don't do as good a job marketing, but we have physical, tangible assets, including the patents or the trademarks or other things that we can or safeguard against our investment with. So they're looking at it. One is for defensive postures again, two is an investment, and three, if you're looking at it as a startup, you're saying this is something that we can actually put as an asset, leverage or increase our valuation such that we get a better valuation bump than if we don't have it or we're selling other aspects of the business.
And so what do you think is the main trend in the IP space today? What seems to be driving things?
Yeah, I mean, I think the driving thing, so one of the interesting things I would say if you're asked today is, first of all, startups and small businesses are on the rise, or they have been for a while now. If you worry about inflation, where the economy's at today, and that things maybe have a different aspect, but through most of COVID, people were actually focusing more on startups and small businesses than than they had been previously. They had more money in their bank accounts. They had more time as they were locked down or otherwise not going out as much. And they were pursuing what they want, their passion, what they wanted to do. And so as they're now doing that, they're putting in their investment. They're putting in more time and effort and money. And they're saying, okay, now I want to monetize that. I want to make it a real business. I want to be able to protect it. I don't want others to copy me. And then the question is how do I do all those things? How do I monetize it? How do I protect it? And how do I prepare for growing the business? And that's where IP comes in. So it's really been one where, especially with the people putting a larger focus on doing their own thing, or startups and small businesses, that has become even more into focus as they're looking to make sure they have those protections and assets in place.
Great. And so what are the key lessons you've learned about IP with respect to startups? What's your advice to them about using it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the trade-offs for startups is you always have more things to spend money on than money to spend. Always seems like there are always more than enough places to spend money on and never enough places to get the money from. And so you're always trying to balance the competing interests. Do I hire someone new? Do I do marketing? Do I do sales? Do we get a building? Do we do product or inventory? Do we do the legal stuff? And oftentimes, and I get why, but they'll push the legal down the road because it doesn't feel like it's on fire as much. It's not quite as critical. It's not quite as urgent. And yet when you push that too far down the line, it can create problems later on. So as an example, if let's say you created the world's next best iPhone, blockbuster, greatest invention in the world, everybody's going to want one. And then you go out, you build it, you put it on the marketplace, you're just getting it startup. You get out there a couple of years and say, okay, I've been a couple of years out. We finally have a bit of income. We should probably go get a patent on this, or we should probably protect it. Problem is that by that time you're too late. You miss your window that you can file a patent. So one of the rules in patents is that once you put something out in the public, put it out on the website, offer it for sale, anything of that nature, you have 1 year from that initial date you put down the public within which you can file a patent on. So if you miss those things and you wait for too long, you're going to start creating hurdles for your businesses to where you've lost a lot of the value. So one of the best things is early on is, even if you can't get started today, at least get a roadmap in place. Get those milestones that you know when you need to do those, when are those trigger points, how much you do you saving, what is the cost going to be, so you can at least put that along as you're saying, okay, we're 6 months in, we should probably start thinking about a patent. Or, hey, we're getting ready to launch a marketing campaign and invest a lot in the brand. We should probably make sure it's protected and we have exclusivity and proprietary and we're not infringing someone else's brand out there. And so really it's one where at least get a plan in place, get the milestones of what you need to know, get the deadlines, and then you can start to fit that in with where the business is at.
Great. And what do you think Starps miss most about the IP process? What did they find that they didn't expect?
Yeah, so one is the deadlines. A lot of times people don't, and maybe just harping on that just a bit more, and then I'll give you another one, is that, when you're doing it, within intellectual property, it's really within the law in general, but intellectual property is certainly not an exception. The person that does it first is usually in the best position. In other words, if you file a patent first, if you get the trademark first, if you do the copyright first, 99% of the time you're in the better position than whoever doesn't have it. So one of the things to make sure is that you know your deadlines and your timelines, and that's oftentimes what startups and small businesses will miss as they're getting forward. And so harping on that one a bit. The other one is, a lot of times they think, well, we're not doing anything unique. We're not doing anything different. We're just kind of going out and copying what others or people out there are putting our own spin on it. And so they won't think about what is proprietary about them. And so oftentimes, hey, they are doing something different. That's why you're on the marketplace. If you're copying exactly the same as what others are doing, you don't have a competitive advantage. And that doesn't always have to be inventions. That can be you're much better at branding, you're much better at marketing, you're much better at sales, you're better at creating viral content, you're better at, or you have some small variations to products already out there that make a big competitive advantage. And oftentimes you don't really think about that. The other thing that kind of builds onto that is oftentimes as you're going through your business, you don't really ever step back to say or think about what is different or what is protectable about your business. And give you an example with patents again, people oftentimes, if you work on something long enough, it becomes obvious to you. In other words, you're thinking, oh, yeah, this is pretty obvious. Anybody would have thought of it. It's probably already out there, when really in reality, you spent a lot of time and effort developing something that's different, unique, that's proprietary. And yet because you've been with it so long, you don't really think about it. And so those are a few kind of things that can be holdups or can be catches, as well as that businesses, especially startups and small businesses, should be thinking about.
So you help startups with their intellectual property matters. What's a common myth about your job or field of expertise?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably one where it's YouTube has wrecked a lot of service-based businesses, or it's created that extra hurdle in the sense that, and I'd probably put it internet at large, so not just blaming YouTube. Everybody thinks they're an expert, right? And especially when it's something that is not physical, tangible. So, if you have to go get a surgery, you're probably going to go into the doctor and ask them to do the surgery because you don't want to cut yourself open. If you have to have your car fixed, you're probably going to say, okay, now it's getting into, well, maybe I can do it. Maybe I'll go watch a YouTube video. And then half the time you mess it up worse and you take it to the mechanic and they said, this is going to cost you twice as much. But because people are now can watch YouTube videos, they can read it online, everybody is an expert. And because everybody's an expert, they think that they can do it on their own. And sometimes that's the case, and sometimes the YouTube video is great. A lot of times, especially in the service-based business, and including the legal and intellectual property, you get into it and it gives you a false sense of confidence. In other words, you think that you know more than you do, and so you'll draft up a patent or a trademark or a copyright, or you'll form your own business or do anything of those nature, and you won't understand the things you're missing out on. You won't understand the things you're overlooking or that are hampering your business, so you have that false sense of security. And the best analogies I can give is, if you were to go out and you want to have a shelter over your head. So you're saying, okay, out in the wilderness, I don't have any shelter. I need to have something that keeps the rain off and the snow off of me. What do I do? Well, if you had a tent, even if you had no instructions, you had no idea how to set up a tent, given a little bit of time and effort, you could probably get some sort of structure over your head to keep the rain and the snow off you. Not going to be comfortable, not going to be great, but that's kind of if you're going to do it all on your own without any guidance. Now, let's say you said, well, I can go read some DIY video or read some DIY books, watch the YouTube videos, and I can do it. Now I can go build my own house, and you could go build your own house. It may be better than a tent, maybe a little bit more comfortable, maybe a little bit more durable. Or you can go and you can hire someone that actually has the experience. How do I do electrical? How do I do heating and air conditioning? How do I make a sturdy foundation? How do I get shingles and roofing and all those things? And that's where you're going to say, much analogous to that is when you're looking for an attorney doing intellectual property. If you're a startup and small business and all that you can afford is to do the tent, do that over, get something over your head, do it. It's better than nothing. You have some air shelter, but don't get confused with the tent over your head being the same thing as the house that's built that it has all the finishes and the polish, because it is two different work products. And so I think a lot of times the internet has made everybody an expert, or at least make everybody think they're an expert, but there are a lot of things that you're unaware of or that you haven't considered until you get there, unless you have the experience to do so.
Great. And so what online source of information do you find most helpful in your work?
Well, my work is probably two different things. I mean, if I'm going to do for my work, it is intellectual property. I'm going to go to what's called the MPEP. It's a guideline. It's a very thick rule, has all the rules for how to do patents and trademarks, guidelines. You can go do that. It's going to be really boring reading. Most people aren't going to want to go through it. I've done it enough with enough experience that I have, or most of the things in there already pretty well aware of and understood. And you can go to the USPTO, US Patent and Trademark Office. They have some material there. There's a lot of case law out there. There's, patent watchdog websites for attorneys. Now, that's for attorneys. Now, if I was a startup or small business, I wouldn't go to any of those because they're going to be, one, very boring. They're going to be hard to understand, and they're going to be overwhelming. If I were to start somewhere, I would probably go to YouTube. I would probably go to the internet. I think now, on the opposite of what I just said, I don't think that you should go into these things blind and you should just go and say, attorney, tell me what to do and how much it's going to cost me. I think you should go and read, or go watch some YouTube videos, which are great. Go find a good law firm or two. And a lot of good law firms will have quite a bit of educational material. We have a ton. We have videos, we have blogs, we have podcasts, we have everything else. We're just striving to help or educate the audience. But find some of those materials, whether it's a law firm website, whether it's some blogs for startups and small businesses, whether it's YouTube. Start out there, get that education, get that at least initial understanding before you go talk to an attorney so you can have a foundation or basis to ask questions and understand things. And then I'd probably say you go talk with an attorney, then you can get the guidance that you really need.
Great. Well, you see a lot of businesses and business models. If you could start a business tomorrow, what would that business be?
I'm one of those people that have 5 ideas before the days or before I get into work, another 10 while I'm at work, and another 20 before my head hits the pillow. And so I have more ideas than I'll ever be able to pursue. And as a complete aside note, if people do like LinkedIn and they are on there, I will usually once or twice a week, I'll throw out my what I call great idea, terrible idea. And I'll just basically, it's an idea I had. I don't ever really intend to pursue it, but it's fun to kind of throw it out there, see if people like it, get their feedback, get their ideas, and it's kind of a fun way to engage on there. So you go to hashtag great idea, or great terrible idea, and you can find all of my ideas. You're welcome to any of them because I'm never going to pursue them. You know, if I were to, I talk to my wife about this all the time. If I wasn't an attorney, what would I do? I could see doing anything from, I think a food truck sounds like fun. I would always want to go do that. I love trees and especially fruit trees. I would, if I could make a go of it, I would do an orchard. So we have a few fruit trees. We have bees that we get honey from. So I'd probably get into something like that. If it was more on the technical side, one of the ideas that I'll probably never pursue, but I always thought was a cool idea, was to basically do Uber for customer service. In other words, one of the pain points a lot of people have as businesses is I need to have customer service, but I don't have enough to hire a full-time person, especially if I'm a startup or a small business. But it's hard to, you can do the chat bots, which nobody likes to use the chat bots and they're usually frustrating. You can try and do FAQs online, but it doesn't really answer anybody, or you have to figure out who's going to man the phones for when a customer calls and has a question. My idea was always, why don't you take kind of the Uber approach where you do crowdsourcing, where people can log on that have experience. So let's say you really love the iPhone, you know everything about the iPhone, and you can do a great job of customer service just because you're an Apple fan. Then you can sign in for, if as a customer service request comes in, you can do an initial troubleshooting, answer the questions with the customers because you already know a ton about the product, and it makes it so you can almost crowdsource the customer service. So don't know if I'll ever pursue it, but if I were to go off or start a completely new career, I could see going and doing that.
No, that's a great idea. I can see that coming in the near future as well, potentially from this podcast or your LinkedIn post. So that sounds like a great one. In the last few minutes that we have here today, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Yeah, so we pretty well, at least kind of as initial entrance in or dipping your toe in the water, covered IP quite a bit. And so I shift gears. Maybe one other thing that people should be considering, if you haven't already, is when you're starting a business, you need to get a LLC, or you need to get a business formed and in place. That can be an LLC, an S Corp, C Corp, nonprofit, whatever the business is. And the main reason being is that gives you probably the initial and best level of protection for your personal assets. So if you start a business and you don't have those in place, you're going to, now if somebody comes along and you get sued, whether it's an employee or you have a trademark infringement or, patent infringement, or you have a accident or you have a product defect, any reason they come after you, you don't have any of those in place. You've now just put your home on the line, life savings, your retirement, your cars, and any other assets you own, they can come after and get. Whereas if you get that LLC, S Corp, C Corp, or business in place, it gives you that layer of protection where, yes, they can come after the business, they can't come after you personally. And so if I were to start well before you do any of the other stuff that we talked about, the intellectual property, other guidance I would give is get a business or something formed and in place. LLCs are simple. They're usually straightforward. There's a lot of different services that offer them that you can at least get something in place and get that going. So that'd probably be the one other piece of advice if I were getting going, or counseling, but somebody get going, is to make sure you get that in place as well.
That's great advice. So how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
So I'll give them 3 different ways of contacting me, depending on how they want to reach out to me. If they want to schedule a one-on-one meeting consultation, we do free strategy meetings where you can grab 15, 20 minutes of time, chat through what you're doing, see if we can help answer any questions. So if they go to strategymeeting.com, that links right to my calendar, then grab some time with me to chat. Second one is if they just want to go to the website, learn more about intellectual property. We have a ton of material. We have a podcast, The Inventive Journey. We have videos. We have content, all of which they can definitely check out. Go to lawwithmiller.com, and that'll shoot them to our website. The last one is I'm not as active on a lot of socials. As I mentioned, I am on LinkedIn and love to throw out ideas and engage there. So they can go to meetmiller.com and that goes right to my profile. So 3 ones. You want to do a one-on-one consultation, strategymeeting.com. Find out more about the law firm, lawwithmiller.com. And if they want to connect up with me on LinkedIn, go to meetmiller.com.
Well, that's great. We'll put that in the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Hey, it was my pleasure to come on and appreciate you having me.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.